Can an 8-bit console like the NES play an entire music album? Find out today on Tekavoo.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Tekavoo. This channel is all about taking products and making them do unexpected things using the magic of tech. Today's episode is very special to me because we're visiting one of my childhood favorites, the NES. At its peak, the NES was a gaming legend. Everyone seemingly had one. Its 8-bit graphics and sound defined a generation. Nowadays, you typically find it sandwiched between a beat-up VHS player and a George Foreman grill in our parents' attics. It's been surpassed by many consoles throughout the years. The Super Nintendo, the Sega Genesis, the PlayStation, the Atari Jaguar. And for good reason. Take the PlayStation 5 for example. It's a beast. It has 4K graphics, Dolby Atmos, it can play 3D games, music, movies, it has an online experience, a VR experience, it can do your taxes, probably. The Nintendo Entertainment System, on the other hand, it doesn't quite live up to its name. It can play games, and that's kind of really it. Or is it? That's exactly what I want to find out. Today's mission is simple. I want to see if an unmodified NES can play an entire music album. What I mean by that is I want to take a music album and put it inside an NES cartridge. That cart should work on my NES, but it should also work on anyone's NES. This is a complicated project, so let's break it down into 4 tasks. 1. Does my Nintendo even work? It's been at least 30 years since I last played it. I have no idea what condition it's in. I'm probably going to have to do some open heart surgery to bring it back to life. Open chip surgery? Open CPU surgery? 2. A music CD can hold around 700 megabytes of information. To put that in perspective, that's over 20,000 times more data than Super Mario Bros. 1. So how do we take all of this data and shrink it down so it can fit into an NES cart? 3. An NES can't natively play a music album, so we're going to have to trick it. This means that I need to code a game that's actually a music player that's written in a language that I don't even know, but the NES can understand. Things are going to get lost in translation. 4. Once I have my game/music album, how do I even put it into a cartridge? Can I buy a blank cartridge? Do I need to reprogram a game that I already have? Do I need to build something from scratch? I have no idea, but internet, I'm counting on you for this one. Okay, there we have it, 4 steps. Let's dig in. The NES, what a beauty. I still remember the first day that I laid eyes on this bad boy. I came home from school one day and my brother said that there was something I had to try. I grabbed the controller in my hands and instantly I warped into the Mushroom Kingdom. In front of me, a Goomba was scuttling in my direction. I didn't know what its intentions were at the time, but one thing was clear. I was in its way and I had to move. With a push of a button, I found myself jumping, soaring into the sky like Icarus aiming for the sun. Upon my descent, I adjusted my plumber's boot, aiming for this pixelated being's head, but alas, I undershot and landed right in front of my foe. But miraculously, like a cat using up one of its lives, I found myself at the beginning of my journey once more. Again, the Goomba scuttling towards me. I tried to defeat my foe over and over again, each time modifying my strategy, until finally I was victorious. Much like my first encounter with that Goomba, I'm gonna have to adjust my strategy a bit today. Things don't always go as planned. Okay, enough with the reminiscing. It's time to get my hands dirty, and I mean that literally. My NES is filthy. I turned my NES on and I was greeted with a flashing red light and a black screen. A reminder of why I stopped playing this console to begin with. Back in the day, my go-to fix was blowing into the cartridges and hoping for the best. Nowadays, thanks to the internet, I can find a better fix. It turns out that the culprit is something known as the CIC chip. This was Nintendo's gatekeeper. Prior to the NES, anyone can make a game for any console. And while that does sound great, it also meant that anyone can make a game for any console. A lot of games were made and a lot of them weren't great. Some of them ended up in landfills. Nintendo's solution to this was the CIC chip. The CIC chip essentially prevented unauthorized games from working on the NES. You had to pay Nintendo a royalty fee. Nintendo would collect the money and in exchange you got a nice little stamp, the official Nintendo seal of approval. When you purchased the game with this seal, it was guaranteed to work on your Nintendo, as long as the CIC chip worked. You see, the problem is that chip was prone to failure, and that would lead to this blinking red light that I got. The fix luckily was very simple. Snip snip. A little vasectomy on the chip's pin and boom, your NES is back in business. I'm going to need to open up my NES now to disable the CIC chip. While I'm in there, I'm also going to tackle the 72-pin connector. The connector is what reads your games, but unfortunately over time there's a lot of wear and tear. There are a lot of ways of repairing such a connector. You can individually resurface every pin. You can boil the connector. Yes, boil it like a lobster. Personally, I don't like mixing water with electronics, so I'm going to take the simple approach and just order a new one. Alright, it's time for an 80s style montage. While my Nintendo's under the knife, I'm curious, what's the strangest fix you've ever had to do to a console? For me, it was the PlayStation 1. I had to turn mine upside down in order for it to work. Now it's time for the big challenge. How do I take an entire album and make it fit into an NES game? This section might sound a little bit technical, but I'm going to keep it as simple as possible. The first trick we'll use is something called compression. What is compression? A computer display like a laptop or a phone uses a whole bunch of little dots to represent images. These dots are known as pixels. Each pixel represents exactly one color. Imagine the flag of the Netherlands, and we had to tell a computer how to draw this flag. You have a red stripe, a white stripe, and a blue stripe. You would have to describe what every pixel is. So, let's do it. Red, 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 and so on, until you reach white. Then it would be white, 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 etc. Until you reach blue, and so on. What if instead we created a little formula? What if instead of writing red 1,000 times, we wrote 1000R, and then white 1000W, and then 1000B. Then all we need to do is tell the computer, when you see a number followed by a color, show that color that many times. And that's pretty simple. It'll read the first one and it will draw red 1,000 times, then white, and then blue. And that's what compression kind of is. You're taking a whole bunch of data, finding patterns, and replacing those patterns with tokens. Once you have your token set, the computer just needs to know what that token represents. So in our case, 1000W means show 1000 white pixels. Any questions? Yes, you. Why are you telling us about compression? I'm never going to use compression in my life. We actually use compression all the time. For example, in this question, you can see a little angry face at the end. Instead of saying, this is upsetting me, the person put an angry face. We all know that an angry face means that the person is upset, but they didn't have to write all of that out. That's a form of compression. If you're enjoying this video, you might be inclined to press the like button, and please do, by the way. Without you actually going into the comments and telling me that you enjoyed this video, I can look at the like counter and know that X amount of people liked the video. Now, even with compression, our file size is still way too big for the NES. Luckily, music uses sampling rates and bit rates that we can use to fine-tune our size. Remember those connected dots that we used to do as kids? The more dots you had, the more detailed the picture. However, because we have more dots, there's more information on the page. Let's take another example, like this constellation. Here you can see Leo. Well, if you squint, a lot. I don't know, I didn't name this. If there were more stars in this constellation, the Leo would look a lot more like a Leo. This is obviously an oversimplification. In music, sampling rates are how often we take a sample of the music, and the bit rate is how much information is sent per second. Much like the connect the dots and constellation examples, if we reduce our sampling rate and we reduce our bit rate, we can have a much smaller file size. The downside to that is that lower sampling rates and bit rates also means lower fidelity. The music isn't going to sound that great. After reducing our sampling and bit rates and applying compression, our file is still way too big for the NES. What else can we do? What if we took an entirely different approach instead? With me, I have the music sheet for Beethoven's Für Elise, all 3 pages of it. If I were to play all of these notes on the piano exactly as described, I will actually get a very high fidelity, high quality rendition of the song. An NES, much like a digital piano, plays notes, not songs. It's less about stuffing the entire song onto the cart but rather telling it what notes to play. Think of it as following a recipe instead of eating a pre-made meal. Using this technique, not only can we fit a song on an NES cart, we can fit an entire album. In fact, the iconic music from Super Mario Bros. 1 is doing just that. There are quite a few apps designed specifically for the NES that use this approach. Now, while this does sound great and it is a viable solution, there is the obvious elephant in the room. What if you're not a musician? What if you don't know how to transcribe these notes? There's also a fix for that. Spotify has a free tool called Basic Pitch. The way Basic Pitch works is it accepts a song as an input, and then using machine learning, it converts that song into a bunch of notes saved as a MIDI file. With a little bit of cleanup, these MIDIs can then be imported into Family Studio, which is an app that makes NES music. Finally, step 2 is done. It turns out that making an NES game in the modern world is not as obscure of a hobby as I thought it would be. There are plenty of options. First up, there's NES Maker. Born out of a Kickstarter project, NES Maker's selling point is that you don't actually need to know how to code in order to make a game. It's like building a car with Lego blocks. For this project, NES Maker was probably the obvious choice, but where's the fun in obvious? I went down a different rabbit hole. I used something called the NES Starter Kit. It's not just a kit, it's a full-blown game with all the bells and whistles. The kitchen sink, if you will. It also comes with all of the source code and enough documentation to be used as a doorstop. Lastly, it's written in C, a language I'm comfortable with. I dove into the code, and after what felt like a marathon of head scratching, typing, more head scratching, I finally had my NES player ready. Then came the album art, because no NES game is complete without those 8-bit graphics. This turned out to be the hardest and most painful part of the project. Remember earlier in the video where I said that computers draw pixel by pixel? Well, that's exactly what I had to do to make the album art. I had to draw every single dot individually. Now, I'm no Picasso, but I'm pretty happy with the results. And then it happened. I was about to import my last song into Family Studio when I noticed it, an Export to NES Game button. This is like finding out that there's an elevator after you walked up 50 flights of stairs. But hey, at least I have my cool album art, right? Now the moment of truth. Let's see if my proof of concept works. Before going to a real NES, let's test it out in an emulator. Folks, we've hit the home stretch. We have a working NES, we have a music album that can fit into a game, we have a game that can work on an emulator. Now it's time to try the real deal. To play my album on a real NES, I'm going to need a blank cartridge. Luckily, there are tons of options on the internet. Unfortunately, at the time of this video, most of them were sold out. I did manage to find a second-hand EverDrive N8. Instead of programming a cartridge, I can actually just put my game onto a SD card and the NES can read that. Modern tech meets retro gaming. Love it. I'm being told that we have a commercial to play? That's odd, I don't even have a sponsor. Alright, let's roll with it.
Remember the golden days of gaming? The NES brought us classics like that weird Fester's Quest game, Wall Street Kid, the game that paved the way for the Wall Street Bet subreddit. And of course, let's not forget all the traps we had to set in Home Alone. But wait, there's more! Your NES isn't just a pixelated gaming powerhouse anymore. Your Nintendo Entertainment System can now entertain. Now you too can jam to entire music albums in glorious 8-bit sound. That's right, 8-bit albums on your NES. Why stream high-quality spatial audio music when you can relive the mono sound glory of the 80s on a cart? What are you waiting for? Get your 8-bit jam on today. Music album carts are not available in stores, online, or anywhere else games, music, or anything else is sold.
Well, that commercial was something. So there you have it. The Nintendo Entertainment System can actually be an entertainment system. I hope you had as much fun in this tech adventure as I did. I know I learned a lot, and I hope you did as well. If you enjoy these kind of videos, please consider subscribing, and I'll see you next time.